Shalom Chevra, how are you? I want to share a little idea I heard recently from Rabbi Schuster. Rabbi Schuster is one of the hidden gems of the Torah world. He happens to be the mashgiach at Chappelle's, and has been for quite some time. I've had the privilege of learning a tremendous amount from him in terms of the Torah he's given over, but even more so in terms of how to be a mensch. So he tells a story about Rav Zedela Epstein. Rav Zedela Epstein, who recently died about over 10 years ago, was the mashgiach of Torah Or in Yerushalayim. Before that, he lived in New York, I believe. And he was asked the following question. When you read the Sifrei Musar, when you read books of character traits and character development, you find that a lot of the stories, a lot of the methods to developing are very harif, are very strong in their approach. Something that I would say the modern individual doesn't really understand and is a little bit divorced from. Just to give you one example of such a story that I'm referring to, 1800s, and the father has sent his son away to learn at yeshiva. Takes a 3-day journey to get to where his son is learning in his yeshiva, and after 6 months, the father wants to go to see how his son is doing. So for 3 days, he travels to the yeshiva. When he gets there, the Rebbeim say, "Oh, would you like to see your son? He's learning in the shir." He says, "No, just show me his room." So the rabbi shows him the room, says, "Here, this is where your son this is where your son sleeps." He sees his bed, he sees the bed's made, he sees that everything's in order, the books are on the shelf, maybe didn't have that many belongings, but all the belongings that he did have were organized well, and the father says, "Very good, I'm ready to go home now," and he leaves without seeing his son. I don't think we really understand that. Anybody who goes sees their parents or had their parents visit them while they were in yeshiva, or in seminary, the parents take them out for dinner, the parents, they spend too much time, they probably don't even look in your room. It's interesting because we don't really relate to that type of a musar. We don't really relate to that type of understanding. So the question was asked to Rabbi Zedela Epstein, how do we understand these books? How can we read them? We don't really get it. And what he says that it used to be that somebody had a sense of self that was so strong, a sense of maybe inner love that was so strong that it didn't matter getting such musar. It didn't matter having such interactions because there was that kind of solid sense. And he said, Rav Epstein, as it were, today we don't have that. And I think we see the rise in anxiety, we see the stress, and all the more so at a time like this. How do we understand? How do we go on? And even more so, we find that today, things that we thought we were so involved in, we can't be. I like following sports. Can't do that. I like keeping up with my friends, and I can't do that in the normal way. What is there to keep up with? We find people not having jobs. We find ourselves with friends, with family who have passed away. We're starting to feel it more and more. What's happening? Slowly, we're peeling off layers to get to an inner sense of self. Now, when an individual does this to us, it's very... We can't even... When a person does this, we don't even hear it. We can't even hear it. But when Hashem does it to us, we have no choice but to listen and to become stronger. This week's Parshat, Acharei Mot-Kedoshim, Tiyu Kedoshim ki kadosh ani. We have to be holy because God is holy. That's interesting. Rashi explains this as you have to distance yourself from illicit sexual relationships. The Rambam understands this as having to distance yourself from things that are actually permitted. Right, his famous idea on Kedoshim Tiyu is that you can be a navel b'reshut Torah. You can eat the most kosher steak in the world, But if you're eating steak 3 times a day, you're a glutton. And even though you're not doing anything wrong, mitzad Torah, you're not being holy. And actually, you are doing something wrong, mitzad Torah. You're not being holy. Ki kadosh ani, because God is holy. Both senses, whether you look at Rashi or you look at the Rambam, is saying that there are things that can distract us from a focus. Whether it's illicit sexual relations, but he talks about sin in general, according to Rashi, or the things that are already permitted to us, but if too involved with, can take us away from reality. And right now, we are living in a reality where things have been taken away from us. And through that, as layer and layer seems to be peeled back, I think we are getting a truer sense of who we are. I wonder how many false senses of self we have had. And all of a sudden, when it's gone, we see that that doesn't matter. And what might even be interesting, with the time that we find on our hands, maybe we start exploring things that we really do want. Maybe there's that hobby, that habit, that whatever that you never had the time for, and now you're finding a little bit more of it. Now you're finding that you can do things that you haven't. You guys, some of you know that I like to consider myself an artist, though I don't know if I can call myself an artist when I haven't been drawing in a long time. This week I've been able to find more time to just sit down and sketch. Something that's very meaningful for me, something that I find a lot of meaning in, and I just haven't done it for the longest time. I'm wondering, with the layers that are being peeled away from our sense of normal, we are developing a truer sense of self. The world we live in is giving us musar, and I think if we can internalize it, then we can separate ourselves from those things that distract us, and we can become Kedoshim to you, and in so become more like Hashem. I hope everybody is doing well, and I want to encourage people to reach out if you need. And I want I want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom, Kol Tuv, and all the best. Shabbat Shalom.